Hey guys, tonight we slip into a time when the road was not a paved highway lit with gas stations and fast food stops, but a rutted track, soft with mud, where your boots sink and your shoulders ache. You can hear the crunch of gravel, the squelch of wet earth, and the occasional donkey braying like it wants to mock your tired legs. Imagine being a peasant, no coins clinking in your pouch, no carriage waiting, just your feet and maybe a walking stick. You're out on a journey, maybe for work, maybe to see family, maybe to flee trouble. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this if you expect 5-star accommodations. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where and when people are listening in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first option, after trudging all day and feeling your stomach complain, is not a comfy mattress, it's a barn. Village barns are the unofficial hotels of the medieval countryside. You wander into a settlement, your feet sore, and your eyes scan for the big timber frames with thatched roofs. If you're lucky, a farmer lets you curl up on the straw, warm from the bodies of cows and horses. The smell? Let's say it's a mix of hay, dung, and free heating system. You think you might sneeze yourself to sleep, but it beats freezing outside. There's a strange comfort to lying in a corner, tucked between sacks of grain, hearing the rhythmic chewing of cows. Animals don't snore in quite the same way humans do, though a donkey bray in the middle of the night could still jolt your heart like a bad alarm clock. Historians still argue whether villagers extended this hospitality out of genuine kindness, obligation to tradition, or just because it was easier than arguing with a desperate traveler. Mainstream fact: barns really were fallback shelters for the poor. When peasants traveled for markets or pilgrimages, they depended on the goodwill of locals. In many rural communities, there was a long-standing expectation that travelers might request a corner of space, even if payment wasn't an option. A quirky tidbit: some peasants preferred the warm kitchen corner to the barn, especially in winter. The kitchen hearth was like central heating before anyone knew what central heating was. You'd lie near the ashes of a fire, listening to the crackle of wood, pretending you belonged there. Of course, if you shifted wrong and knocked over a pot, you'd be chased out faster than a stray dog stealing sausages. You may notice that in a peasant household, privacy is not a word in the vocabulary. The entire family might already be sprawled in one room, with a baby squalling, a grandmother coughing, and chickens casually pecking at your toes. And there you are, the extra body, just grateful for a roof. It makes you appreciate the luxury of even a cheap roadside motel today, where at least you only have to deal with a thin wall and your neighbor's TV. But don't think the barn is a guaranteed freebie. Sometimes, the farmer expects something in return, a little labor. You might be asked to mend a fence, gather kindling, or sweep up animal dung before being allowed to settle in. Kind of like paying rent with sweat. And if you grumble, well, no bed for you, out into the night. One debate historians circle back to is whether peasants really welcomed travelers or whether communities were suspicious of strangers. It makes sense. A stranger in a medieval village is both a potential ally and a potential thief. Some records hint at hospitality laws, others at harsh punishments for vagrants. The truth probably lay in a murky middle ground. Sometimes welcome, sometimes hostility. Picture yourself bedding down in straw, scratching at flea bites, but listening to the gentle sounds of animals breathing. There's a strange rhythm there, almost like an ASMR track. The rustle of hay, the occasional snort, the barn door creaking in the wind. You smiled despite the smell, despite the itch, because you're alive, you're sheltered, and you didn't freeze in a ditch. Tonight, the barn is your castle, and the hearth corner your throne. And if you're really lucky, maybe someone sneaks you a bowl of stew left over from supper. Watery, yes, but it warms your stomach. Of course, if you sneeze too loudly from all that hay dust, don't be surprised if the farmer's dog growls at you like you just insulted its ancestors. Nothing says sweet dreams like try not to breathe too deeply in case you inhale enough dust to choke. Still, you drift off, your cloak pulled over you, knowing that tomorrow the road calls again. When dawn breaks, you stretch your stiff back, brush straw from your clothes, and thank the farmer's family with a nod that says, "Asterisk, I didn't steal your spoon, I swear." Asterisk, the road lies ahead again, and this time, your tired feet carry you towards something slightly grander than a barn. The looming stone walls of a monastery or abbey. These aren't just buildings. They're like medieval travel agencies rolled into churches. And lucky for you, poor traveler, the monks inside are bound by faith and tradition to open their doors, even when you don't exactly smell like rosewater. The cloister is a strange mix of solemn chanting and practical service. As you shuffle inside, a monk in rough wool greets you, not with a five-star concierge smile, but with a calm nod, as if to say, asterisk, welcome, weary soul, don't bleed on the floor. Asterisk historians still argue whether monastic hospitality was genuinely generous or carefully controlled public relations. After all, monasteries needed donations, pilgrims needed rest, and the church needed its reputation polished brighter than a candlestick. Mainstream fact: monasteries were critical rest stops across Europe, especially along pilgrimage routes like the Camino de Santiago. These institutions offered shelter, food, and often basic medical care to travelers of all classes, though the poor might get the less glamorous version. Imagine a dormitory where the beds are wooden boards, and the only blanket is the coarse wool cloak you already wear. And the food? Let's say it depends on the monastery's budget. Sometimes you'd get hearty bread, cheese, and ale. Other times, you'd be slurping thin vegetable broth that makes you wonder if the cook waved a carrot over the pot without actually adding it. A quirky tidbit: in some regions, monasteries became famous for their brewing skills. So yes, you might find yourself sipping some of the earliest, strongest beers known to man, although the monks probably pretended it was liquid bread to justify the buzz. There's a rhythm to monastic life you're forced to slip into. Bells toll at odd hours, pulling you from half sleep to join prayers you barely understand. Imagine being dragged out of bed at 3 a.m. because the monks insist it's time for matins. You try to mumble along, eyes half shut, and realize this is the medieval version of surprise group workout class. But at least the singing is soothing, even if your stomach grumbles louder than the choir. And don't expect a feather pillow. You curl on your side, using your own bundle of belongings as a makeshift cushion. And if you're unlucky, the monk's supervising guest checks that you're not sneaking away with the abbey spoons. Hospitality comes with trust, but not blind trust. One debate among scholars is how strictly monasteries enforce separation between rich and poor guests. Some records describe noble travelers housed in clean guest quarters, while peasants got shoved into a side hall with straw and fleas. Other evidence suggests monks treated everyone equally, but you suspect the truth lies somewhere between. Still, there's something comforting about stone walls and candlelight. You listen to the monks' chants drifting down corridors, echoing like lullabies, and you realize that tonight you're safer than on the open road. No bandits, no wolves, no rain dripping into your cloak. You might even let yourself dream, though the mattress is hard and the blanket smells faintly of goat. Sometimes, though, monasteries doubled as hospitals. If you limped in with blisters, a brother might dab them with herbs or honey. That's the closest you'll get to health care. Herbal salves and whispered prayers. Strangely enough, some remedies worked. Honey really does fight infection. Others, like bleeding a patient to balance the humors, made you want to fake wellness just to escape the treatment. One thing's for sure, monasteries weren't always thrilled about endless visitors. Poor pilgrims could overwhelm supplies, eat through winter stores, and bring along lice infestations that made monks scratch their heads for weeks. But turning someone away risked spiritual shame. So, you, the ragged traveler, became part of a constant negotiation between faith and practicality. Imagine it now. You're lying under a vaulted ceiling, shadows flickering from the candle stubs, belly half full from barley bread, the faint scent of brewing ale drifting down the hall. You hear the soft footsteps of monks as they move toward midnight prayers. For a fleeting moment, you feel sheltered, even valued, even if you're only here because charity demanded it. And if your cloak itches, well, that's just the medieval version of a complimentary bathrobe. Still, as you drift into shallow sleep, you know you can't stay. Tomorrow, the bells will toll, the monks will gently nudge you toward the gate, and the road will call again. You'll leave behind the chanting walls and step back into mud, chasing the next place to rest your head. The monastery's bells fade behind you, and soon your feet drag along another stretch of rutted road. Hunger nags again, because whatever thin broth or hunk of bread you were given has already vanished into the black hole that is your stomach. Ahead, you see smoke curling from a crooked chimney and hear a burst of laughter carried by the wind. Your heart lifts. An alehouse, maybe even a roadside inn if fortune smiles. For the weary, coinless peasant, this place is both a temptation and a gamble. The wooden door creaks as you push inside, greeted by warmth, chatter, and the thick smell of roasted meat. Though let's be real, you'll never actually taste that meat. You slip into a shadowy corner, hoping no one minds your mud-caked boots. Here, life feels alive. Dice clattering, tankards thudding, someone strumming a lute badly enough that you wonder if cats are being strangled outside. Mainstream fact: roadside inns and taverns were the lifeblood of travel during the Middle Ages, offering shelter, meals, and gossip. For paying guests, that meant a spot on a bench, or if wealthy, maybe a bed stuffed with straw. But for you, with no silver to slide across the counter, things work differently. Hospitality here is transactional. You trade what you have, whether that's labor, gossip, or even just the entertainment of your stories. You might find yourself sweeping floors, hauling water, or tending to horses in exchange for a crust of bread and a space by the hearth. And if you're clever, you can spin a tale. People love a traveler's story. The more outrageous, the better. Tell them about a bridge troll you saw last week, and suddenly your listeners lean closer, mugs in hand, keeping you around long enough to earn another scrap of food. A quirky tidbit: tavern floors weren't just places to stand or dance. They were sleeping spots. Many inns allowed the poorest to bed down on rushes, dried plants scattered to absorb filth. Imagine trying to fall asleep while a drunken minstrel snores beside you. Someone spills ale on your cloak, and the rushes smell like every dog that's ever passed through. Still, it's warmer than a ditch. But taverns could be risky too. Without money, you're constantly on edge, worried someone will call you a freeloader. Bar fights were not rare, and sometimes the cheapest corner came with the cost of bruises if you accidentally angered a patron. Historians still argue whether taverns were safer havens for the poor or dangerous traps where wandering peasants were easy prey for thieves. Your experience depends entirely on luck, timing, and how well you keep your head down. Even so, there's something comforting in the chaos. You warm your hands by the fire, savor the salty tang of ale someone shared with you, and let the noise lull you. Laughter, songs, arguments, they blend into a soundtrack of human company. It's messy, yes, but compared to the silence of a barn or the solemnity of a monastery, it feels alive. You stretch out on the floor, using your bundle as a pillow, praying no one steps on you in the night. The innkeeper's dog curls nearby, its tail flicking against your arm. Somewhere, someone is still singing off-key about lost love, and you almost smile because even though you're broke, you're part of the crowd tonight. And when the fire dies low and the rushes itch beneath your cheek, you whisper to yourself that this is good enough. Tomorrow, you'll move again, but tonight, you're not outside under cold stars. Tonight, you're wrapped in the noisy warmth of humanity, which, even with the stench of spilled ale, feels almost like home. By the time you shuffle away from the smoky tavern, your cloak reeks of ale and wood smoke. The road bends, and before long, the silhouette of a stone church rises against the sky. Relief washes through you, because even if every innkeeper in the world slams the door in your muddy face, the church porch rarely does. You wander closer, eyeing the thick oak doors, the carvings of saints gazing down, and the deep archway that promises shelter from rain. Church porches were the medieval equivalent of bus stop shelters, open to anyone, but hardly glamorous. You ease yourself onto the cold stone step, clutching your bundle, and breathe in the scent of old incense mixed with pigeon droppings. Not exactly luxury, but it beats standing out in the storm. And here's the hidden blessing. In most villages, no one dares drag you away because this is sacred ground. Even the local drunk who mutters curses under his breath will usually leave you alone if you're curled beneath the gaze of a stone saint. Mainstream fact: medieval churches often doubled as resting places for the poor and traveling pilgrims. Porches were intentionally broad, designed for gatherings before services, but they became natural spots for those with nowhere else to go. For centuries, the church served as both a spiritual and physical refuge. A quirky tidbit: some churches even let desperate travelers sleep inside the nave, especially on holy feast days, when hospitality was emphasized. Imagine lying on flagstones beneath stained glass, your body aching, but your eyes dazzled by moonlight streaming through saints' faces. Of course, the flip side is that you might wake to find a priest nudging you with his staff, muttering that you've drooled on sacred ground. Not the best Yelp review for your lodging, but technically, you still got a roof for the night. Still, the porch carries its own soundtrack. The drip of rainwater from carved gargoyles, the scratching of rats for crumbs, the whisper of wind through cracks. And sometimes, the prayers of passing worshipers float by as they step inside, their words mingling with your dreams. You don't understand half of it, but the rhythm soothes you, a lullaby layered over the chill of stone. But there's a tension here, too. Historians still argue whether the church porch was a genuine act of mercy or a tolerated nuisance. Some records praise the church for sheltering the poor, Others grumble about beggars cluttering holy spaces, scaring wealthier parishioners. You, of course, don't have the luxury of debate. You just need a dry place to curl up. Sometimes, though, safety isn't guaranteed. You glance over your shoulder, knowing thieves roam even holy ground. The logic goes, if God's watching, he'll forgive me for stealing your shoes. You hug your bundle tighter, trying to ignore the sound of footsteps echoing off stone. Yet, there's comfort here. The church bells toll, low and deep, carrying across fields like a protective hum. You huddle closer to the doorway, pretending the saints in their carved niches are keeping guard. Your body might ache from the stone floor, but you feel a strange sense of belonging, as if the centuries of prayers seeped into the walls are wrapping you in an invisible blanket. And if you're lucky, maybe a kindly priest slips you a hunk of bread, muttering that God's table is wide enough for even the poorest wanderer. You take it with both hands, nibbling slowly, letting crumbs scatter for the rats. Not the feast of kings, but a mercy that tastes sweeter because you weren't expecting it. So you close your eyes, stone hard beneath you, pigeons shifting in the rafters above. Tonight, the church porch is your sanctuary. Simple, imperfect, but shielded by sacred silence. Tomorrow, who knows? But for this moment, the storm stays outside, and you dream under arches carved to outlast 1,000 more weary travelers like you. The church bells echo behind you as you step out once more, only to realize that tonight there is no tavern, no monastery, no welcoming hearth in sight. Just the long road stretching into a wilderness that seems intent on swallowing you whole. Fields stretch empty, forests loom dark, and a clearing ahead seems to whisper, asterisk, this is your bed tonight. Asterisk, there's no choice. You set down your bundle, tug your cloak tighter, and prepare to sleep beneath the open sky. The ground is damp, the air sharp with the smell of pine and earth, and dew is already gathering like nature's way of mocking your attempt to stay dry. If you squint at the stars, you can almost convince yourself that this is luxury. The biggest ceiling in the world, patterned with constellations. Of course, the gnats buzzing around your ears are quick to remind you that it's less glamping and more survival training. Mainstream fact, for countless poor peasants, fields and forests were the most common fallback when traveling. Rural Europe offered vast stretches of land where no and stood for miles. Travelers often camped in ditches, haystacks, or woodlands, wrapping themselves in cloaks and praying no bandits, wolves, or storms interrupted their uneasy rest. A quirky tidbit. Some travelers carried a tiny stash of herbs or garlic, not just for cooking, but for warding off both sickness and, supposedly, evil spirits. Imagine clutching a string of garlic, like it's both your pantry and your holy shield. Does it keep wolves away? No, but it might keep your fellow sleeper from breathing too close. The forest at night is alive in ways that make sleep difficult. Every rustle in the undergrowth sends your imagination spiraling. Is it a hedgehog, a fox, or the bandit who's been following you all day, sharpening his knife just loud enough to make you sweat? Historians still argue whether open country sleeping was safer because you were hidden or more dangerous because you were exposed. One thing's certain, you spend half the night staring into the darkness, promising yourself you'll never complain about a flea-ridden barn again. But it's not all misery. There are fleeting moments of strange beauty. The hoot of an owl becomes a lullaby. The sigh of wind through the branches feels like a whispered story, and the glow of moonlight over a misty field makes you think maybe just maybe, the world is holding you in its palm for one gentle moment. If you're lucky, you bed down in a haystack, warmth cradling you, the sweet scent of cut grass reminding you of summer. Just don't move too suddenly, or you'll sneeze until the entire countryside knows where you are. And the practical tricks of sleeping rough? You learn fast. Lay brambles at your side so animals won't approach too closely. Keep your shoes under your head so no thief steals them while you sleep. Position yourself near a ditch to break the wind, but not inside it, unless you want to wake up soaked like yesterday's laundry. Of course, weather turns this rustic, outdoor lodging into pure torment. Rain turns your cloak into a sponge. Cold air bites through wool. And in summer, the mosquitoes feast on you as though you're the main course at a banquet. Still, you tell yourself, at least you're alive, and tomorrow, maybe there'll be a barn or a church porch again. You close your eyes, letting exhaustion drag you down despite the unease. The earth is hard, your cloak damp, but for now you're still. A twig snaps in the forest, your heart jumps, and then silence returns. Somewhere nearby, a night bird calls, and the stars blink above as if to say, asterisk, sleep if you can, little wanderer. Asterisk, and somehow, against all odds, you do. Morning dew clings to your cloak as you rise stiffly from the forest ground. Every joint feels like it belongs to someone 20 years older, and you mutter a groan that could rival the creak of an old car wheel. Today, you're not alone on the road. A cluster of figures trudges ahead. Faces sunburned, cloaks ragged, feet blistered, just like yours. You catch up, and suddenly, you're part of something larger, a traveling group. Traveling alone is a recipe for disaster. Bandits, wolves, illness, you name it. But in a group, there's safety in numbers, or at least the illusion of it. You fall into rhythm with them. Footsteps squelching in mud, the occasional laugh breaking the monotony. Someone shares a stale crust of bread, another pulls out a knife to cut it, and suddenly, you're not just one weary wanderer. You're part of a moving, breathing caravan of survival. Mainstream fact: poor peasants often traveled in bands, especially for seasonal work or pilgrimages. They pooled resources, kept watch in turns, and helped each other when illness struck. Safety wasn't guaranteed, but it was far better than facing the road alone. A quirky tidbit: in some regions, peasants carried talismans or charms, believing that collective luck was stronger when shared. You might see someone clutching a rabbit's foot, another tying a scrap of cloth to their staff as a protection knot. To modern eyes, it looks like a group of weary cosplayers. To them, it's comfort against the unknown. Evening comes, and your band of travelers builds a fire in a sheltered hollow. Sparks fly upward, and everyone crowds close, holding out hands to soak in warmth. A child whines, soot smudges faces, and one old man insists on telling stories that sound suspiciously exaggerated. You laugh anyway, because even tall tales of dragon fights feel better than the silence of night in the woods. But danger still prowls. Bandits know that groups carry more belongings, and sometimes the firelight acts like a beacon. Historians still argue whether traveling in groups really deterred attacks or merely attracted more trouble. Either way, you feel safer with companions. Someone keeps watch, clutching a staff, while the rest snatch fragments of sleep. There's a strange choreography to group rest. People line up close, cloaks overlapping, sharing body heat like a patchwork blanket. Snores ripple down the line, punctuated by coughs and the occasional groan of a shifting body. Your own eyes drift shut to the rhythm of collective breathing. For once, the ground doesn't feel so cold because you're not lying on it alone. Sometimes, though, groups form bonds that outlast the road. A woman shares her onion with you. Tomorrow, you might help her carry her sick child. A young man sharpens your walking stick into a sturdier spear. These are small exchanges, but they weave into a net that catches you. A reminder that even poverty doesn't erase human connection. And then there's the humor. Someone jokes about the stew pot containing more stones than vegetables. Another quips that the fleas biting tonight must be pilgrim fleas who travel as faithfully as their hosts. You laugh, even as you scratch, because humor is a weapon against despair. The fire burns lower, embers glowing like a bed of sleepy eyes. You roll closer to the warmth, listening to the hush of the group settling down. The forest still surrounds you, dangers still lurk, but here, among snoring strangers who've become temporary family, you feel a fragile kind of peace. You tuck your shoes beneath your head, pull your cloak tighter, and drift into a dream where maybe tomorrow the road will be kinder. The road is never polite, and tonight it greets you with weather that seems determined to test every ounce of your patience. The sky turns gray, wind lashes your face, and the first cold drops of rain sneak under your cloak. You keep trudging because stopping means freezing, but the thought claws at you. Where will you sleep in this storm? Seasonal travel is brutal. In winter, snow piles high, swallowing roads and turning fields into blank white sheets that mock your thin boots. In summer, the heat scorches, blistering your skin and leaving your throat parched. In spring, mud sucks at your feet like it wants to claim you as a permanent resident. In autumn, well, autumn buries you under wet leaves that cling to your cloak until you look like a very tired scarecrow. Mainstream fact: medieval peasants frequently undertook seasonal journeys, whether for work in distant fields, pilgrimages, or fairs. Their survival hinged on improvisation. No tents, no sleeping bags, just cloaks, haystacks, barns, and whatever natural shelter they stumbled across. Weather dictated not just comfort, but survival itself. A quirky tidbit: some travelers in colder regions learned to burrow into haystacks like human mice. They'd wiggle inside, sealing themselves in with straw, insulated against biting winds. Of course, if the farmer found them in the morning, the welcome was less than warm. Imagine explaining, "I'm not stealing your hay, sir. I'm just borrowing its hospitality." But storms are unforgiving. You remember nights when snow crusted your cloak and you woke stiff, unsure whether your fingers still belonged to you. Or nights in summer when heat baked you so relentlessly you tried to sleep under a cart's shadow, only to be woken by a rat chewing at your sandals. Historians still argue whether peasants travel more in summer or winter, each season bringing different risks. Was it worse to risk freezing or to march under a punishing sun? For you, both feel like equal torment. Tonight, the rain comes hard. You spot a hedge and crawl under it, trying to make your cloak into a makeshift roof. The water still seeps through, dripping down your neck, soaking the straw you gather beneath you. Your teeth chatter, and you curl tighter, wishing for even the smoky chaos of tavern floor. Yet, despite misery, there's resilience. You think of tricks learned on the road, using your boots as pillow weights to keep your cloak from blowing off, huddling beside a cart or stone wall to break the wind, spreading your damp wool near a fire to dry it, only to smoke yourself like a ham. You joke, half asleep, that maybe you'll wake in the morning tasting faintly of bacon. And sometimes The weather surprises you with beauty. The snow sparkles under the moon, so bright it almost hurts your eyes. A summer night hums with crickets, fireflies drifting like floating candles. Even rain has its rhythm, steady, tapping, hypnotic, coaxing you into a fitful sleep. Still, when you finally drift off, curled against the hedge, you know that tonight's rest is borrowed comfort. Tomorrow, the mud will cling, the sun will scorch, or the snow will burn your skin. The road cares nothing for your exhaustion, but you, stubborn as every peasant before you, will rise, shake out your cloak, and keep walking. Because where else is there to go? The road does not just test your body, it toys with your stomach. Hunger is a constant traveling companion, louder than the rain, sharper than the wind, and more insistent than the ache in your legs. A noble might travel with wagons of supplies, but you scrounge, barter, beg, and sometimes steal a moment of kindness from a stranger's hearth. Food, in truth, is rarely meals as you imagine them at home. Bread, coarse and hard enough to chip a tooth, is your foundation. Travelers carried loaves baked until nearly stone, meant to last weeks. Soaking them in water, beer, or thin soup turns them from rocks back into something chewable. When fortune favors you, a bit of cheese joins the bread. A cheese so sharp and hard it could double as a weapon if hurled at a bandit. Dried fish or salted pork might appear if you've got coin, though often the salt makes you thirstier than you began. Mainstream fact: medieval travelers often depended on markets along the way. Every village had one day a week where traders sold food. But timing mattered. Arrive the wrong day, and the stalls stand empty. Inns, when you could afford them. Sole meals, but these often meant watered-down stew bulked with barley and cabbage. Meat was rare, unless you were lucky enough to pass during a feast day. Quirky tidbit: travelers sometimes carried onions dangling from their belts, both for eating and as a poor man's medicine. The smell was said to ward off illness, or maybe just ward off conversation. Imagine trudging 20 miles with your stomach growling, only to comfort yourself with a raw onion, eaten bite by tearful bite. Hunger invents humor. You've chewed stale crusts so tough you joke they might outlast the very road beneath your feet. You've fought crows for scraps thrown behind a tavern, shaking your fist as the birds claimed the choicest morsels. And once, in utter desperation, you gnawed a strip of leather from your sandal, only to spit it out in disgust, realizing that hunger has limits, after all. But sometimes generosity softens the journey. A farmer's wife presses a heel of fresh bread into your hands, steam still rising from its heart. A shepherd waves you over, sharing a bowl of milk that tastes warmer than any feast. A tavern keeper, noticing your exhaustion, pours an extra ladle of stew, muttering that no traveler should walk hungry. These moments feed more than your stomach. They feed your soul, reminding you the road is not only hardship, but also human kindness scattered like rare coins. Of course, there's danger, too. Foraging in forests brings risks of poisonous berries, bitter herbs, or worse, meeting someone who claims the forest belongs to him. And the thin gruel of wild greens barely keeps you alive. Historians write that many travelers carried dried peas or beans, boiled endlessly into porridge. Bland, yes. Nourishing, sometimes. Depressing, always. Tonight, your hunger gnaws at you like a wolf pacing inside your ribs. You sit by the roadside with a chunk of bread, so old it crumbles like dust. Each bite scratches your throat, yet you swallow because there's no choice. A stray dog watches you from the shadows, ribs showing, eyes pleading. You toss him a crumb, and he wolfs it down faster than you. Somehow, sharing with him eases your own hunger a little. Misery shared becomes less sharp. Lying back afterward, belly still hollow but heart oddly lighter. You think food on the road is never about feasts. It is about survival, about stretching scraps into enough strength for one more mile. And sometimes it is about a kindness that makes you feel human again. Because bread, however stale, tastes sweeter when given rather than taken. And now, as the road quiets beneath your tired feet, let the hunger, the scraps, the shared crusts, and steaming bowls of kindness soften in memory rather than sharpen in the stomach. The clamor of the day, the growl of your belly, the harsh scrape of old bread against your teeth, all of it slowly drifts backward, like voices receding into another room. What remains is not the ache, but the reminder that even the smallest bite, even the humblest gift, carried you onward. Picture it now. The dim glow of a cottage fire, the smell of warm bread carried through the night air, the soft weight of a cup pressed into your hand. The body remembers these comforts more gently than the pains. Where there was once only scarcity, there was also the generosity of strangers, the patient companionship of a stray dog, the simple reassurance that you are not entirely alone. These memories, fragile though they may be, carry more strength than the hardest loaf or the saltiest meat. So let your breathing follow the rhythm of a traveler at rest. Slow, steady, unhurried. The road does not call tonight. It waits quietly, patient, ready to be taken up again in the morning. For now, your pack may lie unopened, your hunger may rest in silence, and your body may sink deeper into stillness. You are no longer gnawing on scraps, no longer fighting crows for morsels. You're simply here, safe in this moment, with only the gentle echo of kindness resting beside you. Allow your mind to soften as the day fades, the edges blur, and the long road melts into the warmth of imagined bread, of a fire never extinguished, of voices that wish you well. Rest now. You have walked far enough. The road can wait until dawn.